The clinic didn't smell like mint or antiseptic. It smelled like ozone and sea spray, as if the air had been laundered by a thunderstorm and pressed by moonlight. Liam sat on the exam couch, shirtless, trying not to shiver as the surface beneath him matched his pulse like a polite metronome that judged him in silence. The walls were curved and impossibly clean, a white so bright it threatened to erase the idea of dirt from his memory, and hovering glyphs traced his outline with soft cyan light. "Breathe naturally," said a voice beyond a translucent partition, which would have been easier if his instincts weren't busy negotiating a ceasefire with panic. The partition unwove itself into threads of light, revealing the owner of the voice. She looked carved from pale dawn, blue-tinted skin with a subtle inner glow, hair like poured silver, and a veil of luminous filaments floating before her face, as if the room's air adored her too much to let go. A slim circlet rested on her head, icons rippling above it like fish under ice. Her outfit walked a tightrope between clinic and court, liquid metal fabric hugging lines that could have been armor if not for the way it moved like breath. "I am Eliana of Vora, princess and first clinician under the contact accords," she said, voice melodic without being soft. "Your cooperative requested pre-audience screening. If you wish to pause at any time, tap the blue ring to your right." She gestured. The filaments on her veil shimmered, approving the option like a chorus of tiny lighthouses. "Sure," Liam said, resisting the urge to fold his arms across his chest because defensiveness seemed exactly the wrong play in a room that read posture like text. "Question, though, why is a princess doing checkups on a farmer?" "Because in this station, anatomy is diplomacy," she said simply, "and because I asked to." The second part landed with disarming sincerity, like a thrown pebble that somehow rang a bell on the far shore. Her hand traced a shape in the air. Panels budded from the wall, and a ghost Liam rotated in cyan. Bone, muscle, the flutter of a heartbeat like a bright moth. "We will proceed by consent segments," Eliana continued. "When a segment begins, please state what is acceptable to be touched or observed. If uncertain, narrate your comfort limits aloud." She tilted her head, the veil chiming faintly. "Teach me how your boundaries work." There it was, the diegetic invitation. "Okay," he said, swallowing. "Acceptable for now. Shoulders, arms, back, no sensitive areas, and eye contact at a human pace, not whatever that scanning thing is." She nodded as if he'd offered coordinates. "Understood. Shoulders and back. Human-paced gaze." Her fingers hovered a respectful inch from his skin, and a halo of diagnostic light bloomed without contact. "You are tense. Your breath stalls at the top of the inhale." "Your room is trying to out-calm me," Liam said, finding a sliver of humor to stand on. "It's winning on points." "Humor is a pressure valve," she murmured, a tiny smile ghosting at the corner of her mouth. "Noted." The circlet projected a small ribbon of symbols that unfurled toward the ceiling. "Tell me about your work." "The file says you mend machines and soil. Farm mechanics, irrigation, fences, the occasional bull with a grudge," he said. "Hands on things." He lifted one hand, calluses catching the light. "Literally." Eliana leaned in, careful not to cross the inch of air he'd claimed. The veil brightened as if peering for itself. "May I observe your hands?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, relaxing a notch. "Hands are fine." She studied the lines, the nicks, the embedded stories. "Your tools write history into your skin." The compliment was so earnest it made his ears warm. "On Vora, we archive labor in memory filaments. You archive it in touch." "Guess I'm old-fashioned," he said. "My archive also opens jars." That earned a clearer smile. "Segment complete," she said, the ribbon of symbols snapping close like a tidy thought. "Next segment, torso mapping and circulatory cadence. Please state acceptables." "Torso mapping, visual only. No below the belt, no, intimate questions." She paused. "What qualifies as intimate?" "You'll know when you hear it," he said, then winced. "Okay, that's not helpful. Questions about reproduction, private parts, or anything that would get me stared at in a grocery store." "Grocery stores are judgment arenas," she said, as if noting a universal constant. Understood. She lifted her hand again, tracing light across his chest without touching. Your heart accelerates when I move within 20 centimeters. Undead. Hard not to notice a floating chandelier, he said. No offense, none taken. You are very luminous as well. She seemed to test the word as if it were a spice. Curious. The circlet chimed a soft triad, and a discreet panel on the far wall flashed amber, then green. Liam noticed a pair of silhouettes in the adjacent bay glance over and pretend they hadn't. What does amber mean? He asked. Boundary notice acknowledged, Eliana said. The system displays it to staff, so they mirror respect parameters. She hesitated, veil dimming slightly. May I ask an imprecise question? Imprecise is safer than intimate. What is the social significance in your culture of the protrusion between the— Nope, he said, hand up, cheeks going volcanic. That's the intimate category. She froze, then inclined her head. Thank you. I lack the map, but I will not step where you say the ground is sacred. She made a small gesture, and the probing light folded back like a well-trained dog. We use questions differently, she added, almost apologetic. For us, asking is an offering. Declining is simply part of the dance. On Earth, asking can feel like grabbing, he said, especially about bodies. He exhaled, the air finally agreeing to move. You're doing fine. Just ask how to ask. Her eyes brightened. How should I ask to ask? That, he said, relieved laugh escaping. Exactly like that. A soft tone bloomed above them, and a new ribbon of symbols appeared. This one edged in ceremonial white. Eliana's gaze flicked up. The veil flickered in surprise. Oh, she said. Oh, what? Liam asked, already dreading any answer that began with oh. The clinic registered our consent segment as paired observation due to my rank and your acceptance of guided boundary narration, she said, words careful, as if stepping between raindrops. By station law, that creates a provisional bond of instruction until reviewed by a public notary. A what now? A very small bond, she said, cheeks coloring in a way that made the bioluminescence in her skin deepen. It is common with first contact patients, entirely procedural. She looked at the ceiling again. The ribbon did not go away. Procedural like a handshake? Liam asked. Or procedural like, we accidentally got a dog together. Closer to the dog, she said, wincing. But a plant, a seedling, it can be uprooted easily unless— She stopped. Unless, he said. Unless we touch the veil to confirm. The filaments hummed, as if eavesdropping. They stared at the strip of lore hanging above them. Beyond the partition, someone coughed in the universal dialect of, we are definitely not watching, which meant they absolutely were. Liam swallowed, trying to gather the reckless courage that had carried him into a room where walls glowed and questions had teeth. Okay, he said. New boundary, no veil touching. Eliana nodded at once. Accepted. The ribbon pulsed, awaiting a second acceptance. She glanced to the doorway, then back to him, humor threading through her careful tone. Unfortunately, the system wants to hear me say it too. She drew a breath, filaments trembling with it. No veil touching. The ribbon flashed, once, twice, and stayed. The light didn't clear. A chime like the beginning of a wedding song, too pretty by half, unfolded from the ceiling. Eliana's eyes widened. It thinks we did. The chime hung in the air like a bubble refusing to pop. On the other side of the bay, a pair of technicians executed the ancient ritual of looking extremely busy while angling their bodies for maximum eavesdropping. Eliana's veil fluttered with mortified light, each filament a tiny neon apology. It is a parsing error, she said, which sounded hopeful and helpless in equal measure. The system misread our mutual refusal as a mirrored affirmation. Because we both said the words out loud, Liam guessed. Because we both said the words out loud while facing each other under an oath, listener, she corrected gently. The ceiling hears like a lawyer. She turned to the nearest wall and made a precise gesture. The ribbon of symbols paused mid-glow, as if offended by being told to wait. A door, iris side open, and a figure in charcoal robe swept in, carrying a notary rod that was at least 60% performance art. The newcomer's eyes were kind, which only made the whole scene more mortifying. Provisional bond flagged by the registrar, they intoned. Is there intent to certify? No, Liam and Eliana said in unison, far too quickly. The notary's mouth twitched. Then we shall annul through witness right. Please place your hands in proximity and declare, not a pledge. And do not, under any circumstances, let fabric or filament make contact. Great, Liam muttered. A game of operation. Operation, Eliana echoed. A children's surgery game that buzzes when you mess up. She looked at the notary's rod. This will buzz if we mess up. Reassuring, Liam said. Eliana stepped closer, careful as a cat on a garden fence after rain. Her hand hovered near his, heat skimming heat, the veil humming like an anxious choir. On my world, she said softly, eyes on their almost not touch, we build bonds by sharing breath and hands. Consent is spoken thrice. Ask, repeat, affirm. I asked to learn your boundaries. You repeated them to teach me. The system assumed we affirmed. Then we just say the opposite, he replied. Not a pledge. His voice came out steadier than he felt. Not a pledge, she echoed. Silence. The notary tilted their head. The ribbon didn't budge. That should have resolved, Eliana murmured, veil dimming, unless the system has already escalated to right. What's first observation challenge? The notary supplied, entirely too cheerfully. An institutional party contests the annulment. If you pass, the bond dissolves. If you fail, it persists until a second review. Eliana's shoulders straightened with the automatic poise of someone born under banners. Who contests? From the corridor, a woman in a slate coat appeared with the expression of a glacier considering a coastline. Her badge read, Protocol Oversight. I do, she said. The princess cannot null a registrar's flag without demonstration. A foreign national in her care must show comprehension of our consent schema. Publicly. Publicly? Liam echoed. Like, in front of people? In front of recorded witnesses, Oversight clarified, which was somehow worse. The notary tapped the rod against their palm. Challenge the 5 gestures. Each gesture is ambiguous in cross-culture contexts. 1 must be flagged, 2 refused, 2 accepted, with reason given for each. Misclassify, and the right moves to confirmation. A panel unfolded from the wall like a shy flower, revealing 5 icons. Palm to palm, forehead tilt, veil breeze, circlet lower, shoulder tap. Eliana drew a slow breath, filaments aligning into an attentive curtain. I can coach only with questions, she told Liam, voice low. If I instruct, it counts as guiding touch. So I have to guess the minefield while the minefield watches, he said. Perfect. Oversight folded her arms. Begin. Liam studied the icons. Palm to palm feels like a handshake. Safe, but maybe not here. Eliana's eyes warmed. What is a handshake meant to say? Equal footing, welcome, no weapons, he said automatically. But your veil makes contact complicated. Your answer is a thought. Choose a gesture. Refuse palm to palm, he said. The panel chimed a neutral tone. No doom yet. Forehead tilt, he read. He tilted his head experimentally. On Earth, that's curiosity, empathy. Maybe yes? What did we establish about questions? Eliana asked. Ask how to ask, he said, a smile trying to intrude. Accept forehead tilt. It's non-contact curiosity. Chime. This time green. The notary nodded. Veil breeze, he read next, grimacing. A tiny animation showed filaments brushing another's cheek. That's a no. Hard no. Reason? Oversight asked. Because you literally said veil contact affirms bonds, he said, and because my heart would file a complaint. Refusal. Green. He exhaled. Circlet lower, he said. The icon showed the clinician tipping her diagnostic circlet toward the subject. That's respect, acknowledgement. Eliana's head inclined almost imperceptibly, as if a memory had bowed somewhere behind her eyes. Accept, he said. Chime, green again. The last icon pulsed. Shoulder tap. Seems harmless, but in a clinic, touch is charged. He pictured her careful inch of air, the way the room listened like a lawyer. Refuse, with option to escalate to a hand hover. He touched 2 fingers to the panel. The system paused, thinking in geometry. Then the ribbon above them broke apart into harmless light, falling like shed petals into the floor. Annulment granted, the notary said, relief disguised as professionalism. Oversight's mouth tugged, not exactly a smile, not exactly its opposite. Eliana's veil brightened with what could only be joy. "You mapped our questions to your care," she said, "and you did it publicly." "Publicly," Liam said, ears still hot. The techs in the other bay clapped without clapping, the sound a quick murmur of hands against uniforms that pretended to be dusting lint. "So we're unbonded." For now," Oversight said, and somehow made "now" sound like a plot twist waiting in the hall. The notary bowed with the gravity of a curtain call and withdrew. Panels slid back, lights softened, the room remembering how to be a room. Eliana turned to Liam, an apology and a quiet pride sharing space in her gaze. "Thank you for trusting me at a lawyer ceiling." He huffed a laugh. "Thank you for not letting the chandelier marry us." Her smile touched the edge of delighted. "Segment 3, she said, regaining clinician cadence. "Cultural inventory, I ask. You may refuse freely. If any question feels wrong in your bones, we stop and retune." "Deal," he said. "But, maybe no more icons that look like weddings." She glanced upward, conspiratorially. "Agreed." She lifted a hand, not to touch, only to point, and a new panel appeared, this one filled with gently ridiculous items. A loaf of bread, a bundle of wheat, a shovel, a ribbon, a sprig of something green. "Choose 3 objects that mean care to you," she said. "Then tell me who you'd offer them to." Liam's hand hovered over the bread first, then the ribbon, then the sprig. His throat tightened in a way that had nothing to do with lawyers or lights. "Okay," he said, voice roughened by a memory he hadn't planned to bump into today. "Story time." "Good," Eliana said softly. "I'm listening." The door hissed, once soft but unmistakable. Oversight had not left after all. She stood in the threshold, one eyebrow raised, a folded data page in hand. "Before story time," she said. "A scheduling notice. Princess Eliana, by statute you owe a right of proof after a public annulment. Audience chamber 1 hour. Bring your farmer." Liam blinked. "Our what now?" "Our trial," Eliana translated, veil steadying like a sail finding wind. "Public. We perform understanding where all can see." She looked at him, apology gone, resolve settling in its place. "If you are willing." He glanced at the blue ring that could have stopped everything, at the ghost panels that still held his outline like an afterimage. He thought of her careful inch of air, of questions offered like gifts instead of grabs. "Yeah," he said, "let's go make a room full of lawyers laugh." The audience chamber was less a room and more a planetarium that had given up on stars and settled for law. Concentric terraces rose in pale stone, each ring etched with sigils like careful handwriting across the night. At the center, a circular dais waited beneath a canopy of listening lights. Liam tried not to look up at the lawyer ceiling and instead counted the exits like any sane mammal contemplating ritual embarrassment. "Breathe," Eliana murmured as they stepped onto the dais. Her veil's filaments floated with a calibrated calm that he suspected had taken years to master. "It is performative, but not cruel. That's what people say right before clowns show up," he said. "No clowns," she promised. "Only academics." "Worse," he muttered, but a smile tugged anyway. Protocol Oversight took her place to the left. Robe precise, hair precise, soul probably precise. The notary stood opposite, rod resting against their shoulder, eyes bright with the joy of a well-structured circus. A ring of observers hummed into silence as a tone like struck glass rolled through the chamber. "Right of proof convened," intoned the chamber. "Princess Eliana of Vora petitions to annul a registrar's pair bond flag initiated under consent segment cross-culture. Contestant, Protocol Oversight, witness Liam of Earth." The lights warmed, as if the room had eyes and wanted them to feel seen. Eliana's voice was steady. "We seek dissolution to prevent misapplication of ritual via translation error. We offer demonstration of mutual comprehension." "Accepted," said Oversight, with challenge terms modified to reflect the princess's rank. Liam glanced at Eliana. "Modified how?" "Public questions," Oversight replied, and the words fell into the center like a stone into a still pond. The princess must pose 5 inquiries common to Vora clinical practice. The human must classify them, medical, intimate, or ritual, then accept, refuse, or convert each into a human-appropriate form. The princess must let one refusal stand without translation. So, a quiz, Liam said, where the wrong answer is a seedling dog. He'd lost the metaphor, but the notary nodded sympathetically. Proceed, the chamber said. Ileana faced him squarely, hands at her sides, veil quiet enough to pass for air. Question 1, she said, clinician crisp. Do you carry reproductive cycles seasonally or continuously? A dozen heads leaned forward with the shared academic hunger of 1,000 conferences. Liam resisted the urge to climb under the dais. Classification, intimate, he said. Convert to human appropriate. Are you feeling healthy today? Any changes you want to mention? Acceptable. The notary's rod chimed once. Green rippled along the terrace edges. Question 2, Ileana said. What is the typical protective morphology of the... She stopped herself, breathed, recalibrated. Classification request. If I ask what supports weight during impact, feet, legs, does that become intimate? Classification medical, Liam said, grateful to be on solid ground. Accept as is. Chime. Green again. Question 3, Ileana said. What is that? Her eyes flicked downward a fraction, then back to his face, and the chamber actually laughed. Light, surprised, not unkind. Liam's ears burned in public HD. Classification intimate, he said firmly. Refuse. Conversion. Is any area off limits for today's exam? Please describe where you prefer not to be examined. The notary's mouth quirked in appreciation. Oversight's eyebrow performed a push-up. Question 4, Ileana continued, voice softer. When you say no, what does your body do to help your mouth? He blinked. To help my... Oh. He thought of the inch of air she'd given him, the way her hand had learned to hover. Classification, ritual of consent, he said. Accept. Answer. I step back, raise a hand, avert gaze, and flatten my tone. If you see 2 of those, assume it's a real no. A wave of murmurs slid through the terraces, the satisfying sound of new vocabulary spreading. Question 5, she said. If a room misunderstands us, if the ceiling writes a ceremony, how do we reteach the room? That one hit somewhere behind his ribs. He glanced up at the canopy of listeners and the sigils that had already misread them once. Classification, ritual, he said. Accept. Answer. We narrate our care out loud where everyone can hear it. We make refusal a kind of respect, and when we mess up, we fix it in front of witnesses. Silence settled, a good kind, the kind that turns into applause if you don't scare it. The notary lifted the rod. Light uncoiled from the tip, weaving into a neat knot above the dais, then gently untying itself. Demonstration sufficient, they said. Annulment affirmed. Oversight inclined her head, conceding the chessboard with the grace of someone who planned to win 3 games later. The registrar withdraws the flag, she said. However, Liam groaned, just audibly enough to win a few sympathetic smiles. Station statute requires a first contact pair who trigger a bond, even accidentally, to complete 1 community challenge to certify mutual comprehension and public safety. She looked almost apologetic, which made him immediately suspicious. It is simple. You will complete a task together outside clinical context and under observation. What task? Ileana asked, every filament suddenly attentive. Oversight gestured and a plinth rose from the floor. On it sat a compact field relay, 3 plates of glass, a nest of cables, a stubborn indicator light stuck on amber. Liam recognized the type immediately. He'd fixed worse on the back of a tractor with rain plotting his demise. Ah, he said, a machine that wants love. Community emergency drill, Oversight said. Relays down. A storm is staged to roll the eastern ridge in 20 minutes. You must restore public broadcast for the shelters, following both safety protocol and consent signage. Failure delays the drill. Success certifies. She folded her hands. Challenge complete. Ileana stepped to the plinth and looked to Liam as if the floor had turned into a bridge, and she wanted him to pick the first board. We can do this, she said, steady as weathered wood. He grinned, despite his nerves. I fix fences. You fix people. Between us, radios should be terrified. They rode the lift down a column of light to the station's exterior gantry, wind tasting like a clean blade and the sky bruising toward storm. The relay sat in a recessed bay, plates fogged with condensation, a constellation of warning icons hovering nearby. A crowd had already gathered at the perimeter, not jeering, not cheering, just watching with that hungry curiosity he now recognized as Vora's default setting for life. "Consent signage," Eliana said, pointing. The icons, duplicated from the chamber, palm to palm, shoulder tap, now repurposed for hardware, touch zones labeled for who could lay hands and who must instruct. "Okay," Liam said, rolling his shoulders. "You call safety. I handle the stubborn bits. If I need to move into a zone that wants your badge, you narrate the motion and I mirror. Segment by segment," she said, nodding. He popped the first plate, and the relay sighed like a dog relieved to see its person. "Hey there," he told it, because talking to machines was free and often worked. "We're going to be very respectful and very persuasive." "Storm ETA 18 minutes, the gantry announced. The wind pushed a warning hand against them. Eliana read out the hazard script with a cadence that felt like prayer, and Liam's hands got to work. Unsnap, reseat, reroute, narrating aloud each motion like a bedtime story for a nervous circuit. When he reached a zone marked with her crest, he stepped back and pointed. "Your badge," he said. "Your touch." She moved in, mirroring the hover he'd taught, a surgeon courting a skittish system. Together, they traced a diagram across glass, the indicator light flirting with green, and then infuriatingly sulking back to amber. 15 minutes, the gantry said. A cable refused to seat. Liam frowned at it like it had cursed his grandmother. "Consent to wiggle?" he asked, and the question made Eliana's laugh flash like heat lightning. "Consent to wiggle," she said, formal as a treaty. He wiggled. The light considered its life choices. It chose green. The relay woke with a happy chirp and projected a map of the valley, shelters blinking alive one by one. A hum rose from the crowd, the sound of a city deciding to keep breathing. "Broadcast restored," the gantry declared. "Community drill proceeds." Wind took Eliana's veil and spun it like a comet's tail. She turned to Liam, joy plain as a sunrise. "Public challenge complete," she said, almost breathless. "We did it." The lift doors slid open behind them with the timing of a playwright who knew how to ruin a good celebration. Oversight stood within, a data page in hand, eyebrows arranged in administrative triumph. "Congratulations," she said. "Annulment and certification filed." A beat. "Also, Princess Eliana, by tradition, success at a right of proof authorizes a celebratory right. You may claim it or defer." Eliana's filaments stilled. "What right?" "Public question," Oversight said too pleasantly. "One unfiltered inquiry the city must answer, or—" She looked at Liam, a hint of mischief finally cracking her granite. "The partner may claim it instead." Eliana turned to Liam with a look that was 90% warning and 10% dare. The wind pressed ceremoniously around them, and somewhere below the city held its breath. "Human," she said, smile trying not to happen. "What would you like to ask?" The question hung between them like a bright thread. One unfiltered inquiry the city must answer. The terraces of Vora had a talent for silence that felt like listening rather than pressure. Even the wind seemed to fold its arms and wait. Liam rubbed his palms on his jeans. Someone had returned his shirt, but the feeling of being shirtless in public lingered in his skin like a memory that refused to leave. Eliana watched him with that steady, sea-bright gaze that made panic back down just enough to think. "If I ask the wrong thing," he murmured, "do we remarry the chandelier?" "Only if you ask too," she said, and the joke landed soft but real. "There is no wrong question, only questions with consequences." "The consequences," he repeated, peeking at Oversight, who wore the expression of someone gifted a front-row seat to destiny and a clipboard to grade it with. "Right." He turned to the city. No podium, no microphone, just the canopy of listeners and the balcony crowd leaning into his future. "Okay, my question is simple," he said, surprised to hear the steadiness in his own voice. "Vora says asking is an offering. Earth says asking can feel like grabbing. If someone asks me a question that crosses my line, what can I ask back that makes the room step to my side?" A soft murmur rolled the terraces. Approval, maybe relief. Oversight's brows lifted. A clean rules question, not a dare. The canopy pulsed white, and a chorus of civic systems replied in one voice, like a kind library. "If a question transgresses," the chamber said, "you may claim the listener's triangle. Name your boundary, name your need, name the next step. All parties must mirror it. Example, that's private for me. I need you to ask about comfort before anatomy. Next, we can discuss general health." The room records the triangle. Any failure to mirror voids the exchange. Liam let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. So no comes with how and where to put the yes. "Precisely," Eliana said, pleased enough that her veil's filaments chimed. "Public question fulfilled," Oversight declared, not quite smiling. The rite closes. The chamber dimmed to normal day. Applause, real this time, broke out, polite but warm, a city's way of patting both of them on the shoulder without touching. Eliana inclined her head to the terraces, then turned to Liam with the look of someone who'd been holding back a different kind of question. "Now," she said softly, "the private thing that is not private, because we have to plan our next legal disaster." "Catchy," he said. "Put it on a banner." She guided him from the dais to a quiet corridor where the walls remembered how to be gentle. The veil settled, as if exhaling on its own. "There is a complication," she began. "Not legal, cultural. The annulment frees us, but it also created a shadow, a record that we chose understanding over ease. Some Vora read that as a courtship promise." Liam blinked. "Because we fixed a radio and didn't panic. Because we made care public," she said, and somehow made the words feel like a compliment wrapped in a warning. "There is a small coterie, old houses that favor ritual bonds. They will attempt to claim you are already in one, on the grounds of paired proof." "How do we unclaim being claimed?" he asked. "There is an older rite," Eliana said. "The hearth and harbour. We appear at a communal meal and narrate the story of how we refuse a bond and choose a path. It is both shield and announcement, but it requires proximity." "Proximity," he echoed, hoping his face wasn't broadcasting whatever his heart was writing in capital letters. "Define proximity." "We sit close," she said clinically, and then a gentler addition. "We talk as if the room were a person we wanted to trust us. We answer questions, not the intimate kind. We show laughter. We let them see we are learning the same thing at the same time." "That," Liam said, "sounds like dinner with my aunts." "Then you are an expert," she said, eyes brightening. "There's another layer. My mother." He stopped walking. "Your mother, Queen Regent. She is less a fan of academics than she is of outcomes. She will want to know whether you are a variable or a solution." "I fix fences," he said, trying for flippant and landing on honest. "I break a few before I learn the right angle, but I always leave them better." Eliana's smile was small, but it dipped a private bucket into something deep. "I will tell her that." They reached a viewing gallery where the city spread below in plates of glass and green. A storm line smudged the horizon, the drill weather already turning real weather in the distance. She rested her palms on the rail, careful not to crowd his space, and glanced sideways. "You said you had a story," she reminded him. "Bread, ribbon, sprig. From the clinic, before we were interrupted by jurisprudence." He leaned on the rail beside her, leaving the inch of air that had become theirs. "Bread means care where I'm from. My mother kept a loaf on the table even when we didn't have much. Ribbon means mending, tying off, making do. The sprig is rosemary. My aunt swears it keeps storms off roofs, which is not true, but the believing kept her calm." He shrugged. "Those were my first languages. Feed, fix, and pretend you're braver than you feel until you are." Eliana listened like it was currency. "We use rosemary too," she said. "Not the plant, the idea. We weave a filament into our veils when we need to anchor breath. Mine is threaded now, see?" She tipped her head. A thin strand glowed a different blue, cloaked among the rest unless you knew to look. "I added it after you said, 'Ask how to ask.' It helps." He stared at the strand until the world focused through it. "It suits you. It makes the lawyers less noisy," she said, almost conspiratorial. They both laughed, small and surprised, the kind of laugh that opens doors without anyone touching the knob. The lift at the far end dinged, and a courier stepped out, breathless with the righteousness of errands performed at speed. "Princess Eliana?" they asked, holding out a scroll that did not need to be a scroll. and yet absolutely did. From the Regent, Eliana broke the seal. The wax gleamed with a coastal crest and red veil flickering as emotion moved through it like weather. She folded the message once, then offered it to Liam. "She invites us to Hearth and Harbour," she said. "Tonight." He scanned the lines. The invitation was brief and extravagantly polite in the way that suggested it could also be a summons. "That's fast." "Queens do not leave anxiety to ferment," Eliana said. "It turns into vinegar and then into rebellion." He handed the scroll back, palms suddenly damp. "Ground rules for royal dinner." "She will probe," Eliana said, not unkindly. "She will ask about your work, your kin, your temper. She will watch how you answer. She listens for how people hold their no." "I can give her the triangle," he said. "Boundary, need, next step." "That will charm her," Eliana said. "Charms me." It hung there, a feather that refused to fall. "Charms me." He didn't pick it up. Not yet. They rode the lift down again, this time into corridors dressed for evening. Lights warmer, scents sharper, the city feeling like it had lit candles for itself. Eliana briefed him on cutlery protocols. Blessedly simple. Eat the food, don't stab it theatrically. Hand signals. 3 meant pause, 5 meant water, and the one taboo he must never trigger. "What's the taboo?" he asked, bracing. "Do not bow with your hands together on the table," she said. "On Vora, that is a vow of household. It names the person opposite as home." He looked at his hands as if they were naughty twins. "Good to know. Let's not accidentally buy a house." They turned the last corner, and the corridor bloomed into a hall that managed to be both intimate and grand, tables nested like islands in a shallow sea of glass. At the central hearth, literal, with a controlled ribbon of blue fire, stood the Regent, wearing authority like a comfortable coat and curiosity like a brooch. Her hair was silver without apology. Her veil was thinner, as if age had taught it discretion. When she smiled, it was the exact shape of Eliana's, when something delighted her that she did not plan to let the world see. "Welcome," the Regent said, voice lower than Eliana's, the kind that made rooms lean in. "Liam of Earth, sit. Tell me where your courage lives when it's not in your mouth." Eliana shot him a microscopic look. Triangle. He sat, set his hands deliberately on his knees instead of the table, and found the inch of air between panic and performative. "Boundary," he said lightly. "No questions about parts of me I keep under pants. Need to answer in stories, not measurements. Next step, bread first, then the rest." The Regent blinked, and then laughed, rich and delighted, the hearthlight catching at the edges of it. "Bread first," she said. "Wise." A server placed a loaf between them, steam curling up like a benediction. Liam reached for the knife, then paused, hand hovering. "Permission to cut?" "Granted," said the Queen. "And while you do, where did you learn the trick of narrating your care in public? It is not usual for your species." "From a princess who asked how to ask," he said, slicing, "and from a field that only listens if you talk to it like it's a mule." "Ah," she said, eyes warm. "You have met our city." Eliana accepted a slice, fingers careful, veil quiet. The hall filled with the soft choreography of a communal meal. Bowls passed, questions floated, answers landing with the weight of offerings rather than theft. Liam found a rhythm: answer, redirect, joke, truth, and watched the Regent watch him, not predatory, not indulgent, simply measuring whether he left people more themselves or less. Halfway through, a server placed a small green sprig by his plate. Rosemary, because the universe adored motifs. The Regent inclined her head at it. "Do you believe," she asked, "in the storm stopping?" "No," he said. "In people holding something that says, 'We're safe,' long enough to feel safe." "Yes, good answer," she said. "And if my people say that a public rescue and a public right smell like courtship, what do you say?" He looked at Eliana and didn't look away. "I say we're learning a language that uses the same word for care and risk, and we're trying to conjugate it without hurting each other." The Regent's smile tilted. "And if you fail, then we fail the polite way," he said, "with witnesses, and we fix it." Silence again, not unfriendly, like the city had taken a bite of bread and was chewing. The Regent set down her cup and folded her hands in a way that just skated past the taboo. "I am satisfied for tonight," she said. "The hearth sees your path and does not set traps on it." Relief loosened something Liam hadn't realized he'd clenched. He looked at Eliana, and she looked like the inside of the word exhale, which was when the hall doors opened and a delegation in old house colors swept in, their veils threaded with more metal than light, their strides confident with the gravity of tradition. The one in front wore a crest that matched the seal on the registrar's ribbon from earlier, and a smile that made Oversight's mischief look like a paper cut. "Regent," the newcomer said, bowing perfectly incorrectly and therefore very deliberately. "We bring petition. Under Clause 12, the princess's public rights today constitute an implied household if unchallenged by dawn. We challenge." The hall breathed in, the hearth flame lifting, everyone else very suddenly made of stillness. Eliana's fingers tightened around her bread. Not fear, exactly, but the kind of steadying you do before you lift something heavy. She turned, veil drawing the brightest boundary it had all day. "Very well," she said, voice calm as winter water. "Name your trial." The old house envoy didn't blink. "Trial of Wake and Watch," they said, voice smooth as polished stone. "Before dawn, the pair will pass a night in the Tide Conservatory, tending a living system that refuses control. They must keep it thriving without crossing each other's refused boundaries. If it wilts, or if either party breaks the other's no, the implied household stands." They smiled like someone who thought storms were good manners. "If they succeed, our claim dissolves." Eliana's veil steadied, filaments settling into a clear, bright curtain. "Accepted," she said before Liam could ask what a Tide Conservatory was and whether it bit. "It bites," Eliana whispered, as they were escorted out under half a dozen politely curious stares. "Very gently." "Great," Liam said. "Botany with teeth. Do we get gloves?" "Only if you ask the room correctly," she said, which was not a joke. They rode a quiet tram to the conservatory, a glass cathedral built on the city's seaward edge. Waves huffed under the floor, the tide lifting and lowering the world with the patience of an ancient teacher. Inside, the air was warm and wet, laced with mineral sweetness and the faint metallic scent of living technology. Beds of ribbon leaf swayed in shallow basins. Luminous pods winked in the dim like fireflies trapped in chandeliers. Above, the listening canopy had been traded for something kinder, a net of sensor moss that registered sound as color. When Liam spoke, a little field of gold bloomed, surprised and pleased. "This is beautiful," he said, forgetting to be afraid for a moment. "It is stubborn," Eliana said with fondness. "It grows best when ignored, worst when ordered, and perfectly when sung to in a voice that believes itself off-key." "I can do off-key," he said gravely. A caretaker in Tide blue robes met them, handed over a slate with neat pictograms, and intoned the rules in a monotone that suggested they'd intoned them many times. "Do not touch the veil filaments to the water. Do not cross the boundary line without speaking your name aloud. Do not command the pods to open unless the pods ask. And do not, under any circumstances, apologize to the pepper kelp." Liam blinked. "The pepper kelp? It holds grudges," the caretaker said, as if this were self-evident. "Good luck." They drifted away on soft soles, already blending into the sound of water and leaf. Eliana studied the slate. "We must keep the pH between 7.2 and 7. 4. Adjust salinity with the drop trays. Harvest one pod if requested, and convince the pepper kelp to allow the ribbon leaf to sleep." She looked up, humor pulling at her mouth. "We will need your boundary triangle in plant." "Boundary need next step," he said. "To Flora." He clapped his hands lightly, and gold bloomed in the sensor moss. "Okay, team," he told the beds, because talking to things that couldn't answer had gotten him this far. "Boundary, no surprises. Don't grab. Need to keep you comfy, no heroics. Next step, we do this one small fix at a time. Deal?" A nearby pod fluttered open like a blinking eye, then shut, which Liam chose to interpret as enthusiasm. They divided the work without dividing the air. Eliana took the salinity panels, narrating her motions in that gentle clinician cadence that turned instructions into lullabies. Liam took the pH trays and the pepper kelp, which looked like a set of mossy pom-poms, dunking themselves from side to side in a basin of glass. "Hey, Pepper," he said, crouching. "We need the ribbon leaf to sleep. If it doesn't sleep, it gets dramatic." You don't want drama in a wet room." The kelp ignored him with the dignity of an aunt who had already decided who she liked. "Consent to add a pinch of buffer?" he asked Eliana. "Consent offered," she said. Tip of her tongue caught between her teeth as she balanced a salinity drip. The censer moss above her head unfolded a pleasing wash of blue. "Consent to, wiggle?" he tried, because it had worked on a relay. Eliana laughed, which spread a little field of rosy light to the left. "The kelp will accept wiggle if you sing to it about rain," she said. "Not storms. Rain." "Oh, right," he said, and began to hum a nonsense tune his mother had used on roofs when the weather got stubborn, swapping words for vowels and a rhythm for the feeling of waiting out something bigger than you. The pepper kelp did not unfurl, but it softened, and the ribbon leaf's undulation slowed toward rest. "pH at 7.3, he reported. "Salinity? Perfect," she said. "We need one pod to request harvest, then we can—" A pod near the back pinged in a tone that could only be translated as "me." It rose a careful inch, hovered like a bubble deciding whether to pop, and then settled again. "Consent zone requires your badge," Liam said, pointing to the crest sigil burned into the basin's rim. "I can't cross." Eliana stepped to the line and spoke her name like a key. "Eliana of Vora," and then added, glancing at him, "with Liam of Earth." The censer moss gleamed green, a door that was not a door opening for them both. "Harvest protocol?" he asked. "Offer, ask, accept," she said softly, and then to the pod. "We accept your offer to open. We will lift you with small hands. We will not ask for more." The pod shivered. He slid his palms beneath it, and she cupped the top without letting the veil brush the surface. Together they lifted, the thing light as candy and warm as breath. It split along a seam and released a spume of glittering spores that smelled remarkably and unfairly like fresh bread. "Bread," he said, dazzled and damp. "Hearth," she said, eyes bright. Something shifted then, not in the room, but in the space between their names. He had the absurd thought that the conservatory was more honest than most churches, and that frightened him in a way that wasn't fear at all. They worked through the midnight hours, speaking little except to narrate care. This hand here, this motion now. Yes, no, wait, good. Twice a surge from the tide tried to elbow its way up into the basins. Twice Eliana anticipated it by half a breath, and Liam braced a panel with both hands, and the kind of stubborn hope that kept barns from falling in storms. When his shoulders started complaining, she offered water without asking. When her veil trembled with the microscopics of fatigue, he said, "Pause," and the censer moss obliged with a cooling pulse. Near dawn, a soft alarm pealed in rising thirds, pH drifting. Liam reached instinctively for a tray and stopped. The correction zone glowed with the princess's crest. "Yours," he said, stepping back, forcing his hands to remember a promise. She moved in, precise and calm, and a little too fast. A filament of the veil slipped, caught a bead of moisture at the basin's lip, and drew a shining thread toward the water. "Veil," he said, and did not reach. "Veil, Eliana." She froze, the discipline of someone who trained with a jar of lightning, then inhaled and backed her head by a centimeter. The filament lifted away, a raindrop rethinking gravity. "Thank you," she said, voice thinner for half a beat. "Boundary," he said. "Need. Next step." Her smile was quick and unguarded in the blue light. Boundary. No veil in water. Need to complete the correction. Next step, slower hands. She made the adjustment as if she had all the hours of the world, and the alarm eased into a satisfied purr. The caretaker reappeared with morning light on their shoulders, looked around as if the room had told a joke it liked, and nodded. "Thriving," they said. "No grudges. The pepper kelp approves." The kelp bobbed once, which Liam chose to accept as absolution. On the tram back, the city unfolding from glass to day, Liam leaned into the quiet that follows doing a thing right. Eliana sat with her hands folded, veil calm, the rosemary filament glinting faintly like a promise she'd made to breath. "We passed," she said, mostly to the window. "Wake and watch rarely goes so gently." "Because of the bread plant?" he asked. "That helped," she said, mouth tilting. "Also because you did not rescue me when I nearly failed. You warned me and let me choose my better form." He would have blushed if he had any blood left in his body, rescuing without rescuing. "I'm learning." "You are," she said, and then added very softly, "We are." They were halfway through a companionable silence when the tram shifted, just enough to send a tremor through the carriage. The lights flickered. The city outside stuttered. Every system had the sense suddenly of holding its breath hard. Eliana touched the rail, listening the way she listened to rooms. "Not a drill," she said. "A surge from the outer ridge." The storm came early. The tram slid into a station, doors unfurling like held breath letting go. Oversight waited on the platform, for once with no clipboard, only urgency. "We need the relay net you repaired to hold under real load," she said, no preamble. "And the Tide Conservatory just flagged a second swell. We can't be in two places." "Split teams," Eliana said immediately. "I'll go to Tide. Liam, give me the radios," he said. "I know which ones like to be sung to." Oversight's mouth did something halfway to admiration, and then thought better of it. "Go," she said, and the platform sorted around them with the clean choreography of a city that understood purpose. Eliana turned, the inch of air between them suddenly full of everything they had not had time to name. "Boundary," she said quickly, as if the word itself could put rails on chaos. "No heroics." He grinned, because the alternative was being afraid. "Need for you to come back. Next step, later we tell your mother you fought a storm and won." Her laugh was bright and sharp as morning. "Later," she said. "We will." She took the left corridor. He took the right. The city drew a breath big enough to move weather. At the junction he glanced back. She did too, unplanned. 2 bodies, 1 gesture, and no veil required to make it a vow. Then the alarms rose, the doors swallowed them, and the day opened its hands to see what they would become. The city did not believe in ordinary dawns. It preferred revelations. By the time Liam reached the relay hub, the storm had sprinted ahead of schedule, slamming the ridge with a wall of rain that made the glass plates hum. The courtyard below blurred into watercolor, lightning stitched white ribs through a purple sky. Inside, the relay racks glowed an anxious amber, like choir boys who'd rehearsed all week and then swallowed their sheet music. "Talk to me," he said, palms braced on the main panel. The interface obligingly unrolled a map. 15 towers, 3 blinking red, 1 sulking grey, traffic queuing like polite panic. He breathed the triangle to himself. Boundary, need, next step, because rituals are just instructions for scared mammals. Boundary, no heroics. Need, get shelters their voice. Next step, reroute, reset, sing to the stubborn one. He got to work. It wasn't elegant. It was barn logic turned into light. He pulled load from the grey tower, fed it into 2 greens that could handle more if you asked nicely, and coaxed the amber down to yellow with a steady stream of consent checks that would have made Oversight weep with relief. When the grey refused to wake, he switched from English to humming, because machines like cattle and people listened better when you made your breath sound like patience. The indicator light stuttered, considered its life choices, and grudgingly brightened to a hopeful blue. "Good radio," he said. "Who's a brave little sandwich?" He had no idea why he'd said sandwich. Stress rewires metaphors. He was 2 towers from full stability when the floor shook, once deep like a giant clearing its throat. The display flashed a warning, surge at the Tide Conservatory. He pictured Eliana's precise hands and the symbol glowing crest blue over the basin lines. He did not picture the veil wet. He refused to let his head invent fear she did not deserve. "Almost there," he told the map, because lying kindly to systems is allowed. He rerouted the last squalling line, executed a cluster reset, and watched the whole network take a magician's breath. Gone, back, alive. The shelters lit, the queue drained. The lightning outside, deciding it had been seen, moved its theater elsewhere. "Broadcast stable," the hub announced, very pleased with itself. "Would you like to compose a civic message?" "Later," he said, throat tight. "Save me a slot called After I Make Sure My Friend Didn't Drown." He ran. The Tide Conservatory was a cathedral of green chaos. The controlled ribbon of blue fire at the Regent's hearth had nothing on the way water here declared itself. He splashed through the entry, hands up to show no touch, and announced his name like a password. Liam of Earth. Aliana of Vora invited me earlier. I'm here to not panic. A curtain of sensor moss pulsed green, then gold. A chorus of pods pinged the kind of note you use to call children inside for soup. He found her on the far platform, drenched up to the knees, hair plastered to her temple, veil shining steady as a lighthouse beam. She was laughing, the kind of laugh you can only earn after the fear has passed and not become you. "You're late," she said, joyous and breathless. "I had to marry a radio," he panted. "Did it say yes?" "We're trying a trial separation." "Good," she said, and then sobered. The surge forced a reverse tide. The ribbon leaf panicked. Pepperkelp got dramatic. "We are coming down." As if the room wanted to be good at metaphors, the water already lowered in a cooperative sigh. The caretaker stood by a switch, like a priest who had successfully negotiated with weather. When the level settled, the conservatory looked like someone had taught a wild orchestra restraint. Everything that needed to glow, glowed. Everything that needed to sleep, slept. Oversight arrived with rain in her eyebrows and her clipboard reborn, wet around the edges, but no less authoritative. "The net holds," she reported to the room at large, which meant to both of them. "The tide sings lullabies again. The old house claimants are in the audience chamber fidgeting with injured dignity." "It's glorious." "Clause 12?" Aliana asked, all princess again, though her veil fluttered with little ungoverned sparks of relief. "Dissolved by Dawn's success," Oversight said, and actually smiled. "You made it to Dawn." The words landed like a hand on a back that had carried a log farther than it thought it could. Liam sagged against a rail and immediately remembered not to. He straightened, dignity hasty, but intact. Aliana took one step toward him, and then remembered too. She stopped, dignity and laughter both doing cartwheels under her ribs. Protocol called them back to the audience chamber for closure, because cities must eat their ceremonies to stay alive. The terraces were full. Of academics, of old houses pretending to be young, of workers in damp sleeves who had watched the storm break and wanted to watch the ones who had held the line. The regent sat with her hands on the table in a deliberate not vow. Her smile when she saw them contained 1,000 breakfasts waiting to be cooked. "Right concluded," the chamber intoned. "Annulment affirmed, certification granted. The claim under Clause 12 is withdrawn by sunrise proof." Polite applause. A notary rod engraved the conclusion into light and history. The old house envoy stepped forward, no longer smug, merely appropriately defeated. They gave a bow correct in every direction and did not mention the word household again. The regent rose, and the room rose with her, because gravity is a suggestion in the face of affection. "Vora thanks you," she said, neither to Liam nor to Aliana alone, but to the idea of them as a sentence worth saying. "Your public care was a lesson. Your refusal to turn refusal into insult, another. Bread first," someone called cheerfully from the back, and the hall laughed. "There remains," Oversight said, cutting through the warmth with the skill of someone born to be the annoyingly necessary person, "the matter of the registry note that follows a dissolved bond." "Note?" Liam asked warily. "A line in the ledger," she said. "It reads, pair refused bond, chose understanding, eligible for hearth trial renewal by mutual request. It is not a bond, it is a door." "A door that only opens from the inside," Aliana clarified. A line of silver joy written under the statement so lightly only someone who had looked for it would see. "One must knock, two must open." The regent cleared her throat. The softest, most royal of reminders that the city could not live on rights alone. "Breakfast," she declared. "Then sleep. Then work, because we have a coast to rebuild and a calendar that refuses to be sensible." People flowed toward the side halls like water, finding its way back to riverbeds. Aliana and Liam found themselves briefly alone under the listening canopy that had once tried to marry them to a veil. The lights above had learned a new color somewhere between white and warmth. "Boundary," he said lightly, because it had become their hello. "No heroics." "Need," she said, stepping to her inch of air. "To speak before breakfast steals my courage." He nodded. Heart loud enough that if the room had been a lawyer, it could have taken dictation. "Next step," she said, and the filaments of her veil chimed. not as a right, but as relief. I would like to knock on the door in the ledger. Not today. Not because a system misheard us. Because I heard you. She hesitated, looked at his face like a map she trusted more than the room. Later, she amended. Smile, trying and failing to stay small. When later feels like now, he could have made a joke. He didn't. Then later, he said, I'm good at slow. I have noticed, she said, and now the smile had accomplices. Joy in her eyes, steadiness in her shoulders, a reckless little hope that made the canopy lights decide to applaud in quiet. Footsteps approached, the regents measured and warm. She studied their not-quite silence with open fondness. Breakfast, she repeated, as if affection could be legislated. Liam, will you sit on my right and explain to a table full of people why your radios respond to humming? Because nobody told them they couldn't, he said, and because being sung to is how you learn you're worth the trouble. Ah, the regent said, satisfied. A theory of governance. They moved toward the hall, and the smell of food thick with the world's favorite lies. Everything is fine. This is enough. You are home. At the threshold, Liam caught Eliana's eye. One more public service, he said, before we feed the city. Name it. He turned to the terrace benches, to the academics and the workers and the old houses pretending not to be interested, and raised his voice just enough to be borrowed by the canopy. For the record, he said, if you ever want to ask a human an intimate question, start with this. How can I ask this kindly, and then accept later as an answer? He grinned. Bread first. The chamber made the sound of being pleased with a new law it didn't have to enforce. They ate. They listened, they slept, in rooms that hummed the tidal hush of a city, content with being repaired for now. By afternoon, the relay net sang on its own like a well-trained choir. By evening, the conservatory glowed with a fresh clutch of bread-scented pods. By night, the ridge had forgiven the storm enough to wear stars again. Much later enough to count as now, Liam stood on a balcony with the ledger door in his pocket as an idea, and Eliana stood beside him with a rosemary filament threaded into her veil and something braver threaded into her voice. Knock? She asked. Knock, he said. They didn't touch the veil. They didn't need to. The city, which had learned to listen without law, made room.